As a kid, I would often just enjoy life for life's sake. I never gave thought to any big questions or even really focused on the future because I was so young, had so much time to let things go by. And with all things, that too must come to an end. As I began to form an actual coherent identity, I began to ask, who am I? What is my purpose in life? As I began to be forced to see my own mortality, that I was indeed getting older, I began to think. After what can only be described as half a decade in the wilderness, I eventually decided that I wanted answers, and I would answer them myself. So I did what I usually did. I went out on a long and protracted drive, finding myself eventually in a park, which essentially was a massive forest, with several questions on my mind, such as, what is free will, and do we have it? And being at peace out in nature, seeing the vast world below, and the unfortunate reality of it all is, despite being out here, I couldn't answer a single question. So I left. But while I was leaving, I thought of a book, an old little book.
Are you free? Free to choose what you do and make decisions? Or are you an NPC, unable to decide anything for yourself?
Stoicism takes the position that
I don't think that human free will means the ability.
It was your decision completely. This is what we call free will.
Okay, I know what you're thinking. What does free will have to do with identity? I personally believe that free will is connected to identity. We often look at our core values, choices, and ideas as being a crucial asset of our identity. So the question of free will must come up. If we don't have free will, then do we even have identity? My essay covers the dyadic view of identity in the Theologia Germanica, so I'm going to use this video as a complementary resource about the concept of free will found within. Within the Theologia Germanica, it describes a temporal identity and an ethereal, eternal identity. When it establishes how the relationship between man and God works, it asserts that the nature of man is rooted in selfishness. that we as people are charged with the task of removing the selfdom or our rationality. Now, the curious thing is that the text asserts that when we are born, we are possessed by an evil spirit. In chapter 22, the author writes, "It is written that sometimes the devil and his spirit do so enter into and possess a man, that he knoweth not what he doeth, and hath no power over himself. It is true in a sense that all the world is subject to and possessed with the evil spirit." So when we are without God, we are relegated to not only our selfish will, but to the devil. See, this we have no choice nor control over, and the only way to freedom is by being subjugated by the will of God. The author continues in chapter 22, stating, "Now a man who should be in like manner possessed by the Spirit of God, so that he should not know what he doeth or leaves undone, and have no power over himself." This is the two choices we are essentially presented with. Be a slave to the devil and yourself, or to God and all things holy. The author never makes any significant claim throughout the text that choosing the will of God is truly our choice, but rather we kind of receive a divine revelation moment of, I am bad, terrible, and should be destroyed. When we take what the author has said into consideration, it seems to suggest we don't have free will. You may be confused. If I believe that free will is tied to identity, yet we don't have free will, then why does the text suggest we have a dyadic identity, both existentialist and essentialist in nature? How are these not in conflict? Because we as modern people firmly believe our identity is formed by choice. That is a good question, so let's answer it. Okay, so I'm going to attempt to answer this question without a script. Now, that may seem crazy at first, but I think this is actually one of the best ways for me to possibly answer this question, because it forces me to kind of think through things live, and it gives you more of a raw view of my thought process. So as I discuss in my essay, the Theologia Germanica takes this this dyadic view of identity, that we have this temporal view and then the eternal identity. And then from there, it goes on to say, okay, so our temporal identity is that of a sinful, fallen man, and that our eternal identity is that of a child of God who is justified thanks to the grace of God. So if we don't have a choice in choosing either one, but rather we are, I guess, drawn to God, or he draws us to him and forms us, we can still form an identity. So you see, the author doesn't discount our rationality, right? He says our rationality is our sin, but we can use that rationality to inform my identity. So if we never come to God, we only have this temporal identity. We're a sinner, but we feel no guilt over it. We feel no anguish, no worry, because it doesn't matter. It's temporary. Yet if we go into the view of, let's say, someone who is drawn to God and they seek to follow his commandments, then they go into the just and sinner identity, where they are both sinner in the sense that they use the rationality to justify their actions and perhaps maybe their vocations and their hobbies, yet also they connect with the eternal presence of God and the forever. So it's not a contradiction that we don't have true free will, at least not in the, I guess, the popular sense of the view, but rather in this weird Lutheran view of what identity is. Yeah, that's the thing with Lutheranism and generally German theology, is that we like to be kind of weird and leave the mystery. We're very mystical. We don't like to over-explain things. So even if it was a contradiction, you'll probably have a lot of Lutheran pastors that go, well, it's a mystery, don't worry about it. But I think I gave a sufficient answer as to why it's not a contradiction and how free will does play into our identity. So even if you disagree with me on this, I think this question is still important. Or rather, we should consider free will more often when we think about our identity.